The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. Chapter 30. Acta non Verba. Part 2. She didn't give him the opportunity to protest as she dragged him out of the living room and into the kitchen, where 5 ponies were waiting. Elias felt his left eye twitch when all their eyes fell on him as Bookbinder let him in. As if taken directly from the painting, Bookbinder and Nightflash's parents stared at him with mixed emotions. Elias could easily identify who was who. Nightflash's parents looked like separated out versions of their son. Flash's mom matched his fur color perfectly, and she was giving Elias the nastiest glare. Next to her was a gray Pegasus that looked just like Nightflash in every way, save for his coloration. Even the eyes matched, which was downright fascinating. He was too glaring at Elias, his muzzle set in a hard frown. In his lap sat a small white unicorn, who stared at Elias's bad eye with fear, shivering and cuddling tight against her father's chest. Bookbinder's parents were a completely different story. Bookbinder's mom, a light purple unicorn, was staring at Elias in what could only be described as awe. A familiar twinkle sat in the mare's eyes, and if Elias didn't know better, he would think that the pony was about to try to pounce on him. Her father, a remarkably familiar pony, had the same look, his rump wiggling ever so slightly in his chair.
"Is this him?"
Bookbinder's mom asked softly. Bookbinder Dad nodded once. "Yep, sure is." The light purple unicorn nodded slowly, then looked at Bookbinder, who dipped around Elias to stand next to her parents, a mischievous twinkle in her eyes.
"Bookbinder, is this the guard you told us so much about?"
Her mom asked sweetly. Bookbinder smiled at Elias and nodded once like her father.
"Yep, sure is."
The purple unicorn smiled widely.
"Have you already shown him how we introduce ourselves in this family?"
Bookbinder clicked her tongue and nodded again.
"Of course I did. In fact, Elias loves it so much that we do it every day."
Her mother's pupils dilated and she tensed up, wiggling her rump aggressively in the air.
"Excellent."
As a unit, all 3 ponies leaped at Elias, driving him to the ground in a perfectly coordinated ball of fluff as all 3 began aggressively snuggling his face. Learning from the lessons of his past, Elias wisely kept his mouth shut to avoid inhaling the copious amounts of fluff that covered the trio. He waited patiently for the ponies to get it out of their system, but when the affectionate creatures didn't stop after 100 count, Elias had to work removing them. Their numbers worked in their favor, unfortunately. Still, he wouldn't go down without a fight, and he managed to get his right arm free, curling it around the bright blue unicorn, hugging his chest tightly. A few scratches later and the pony's grip loosened as the stallion purred like a cat, leaning into Elias's hand. Elias was smart enough to keep the scratching fingers always just out of reach, drawing the pony away as he kept trying to lean into the scratches. With the breathing room afforded by him by the departure of one of the ponies, Elias was able to wriggle his left hand free. The limb set about the same plan as his right one had, and he drew Bookbinder's mother away from the promises of ear scratches. That left one, and she was staring at him with an arrogant grin.
"You may have defeated my parents' snuggles, Elias,"
Bookbinder said with a smile.
"but I am wise to your ways, and while I enjoy them, your ear scratches will not be enough."
Elias smiled right back. Maybe, but you seem to forget that we have an audience. Nightflash stopped wrestling his brother less than a minute ago, and he never misses out on snuggling. Bookbinder looked up in confusion, then her eyes widened as she beheld a quivering Nightflash, his tail lashing back and forth as he eyed the 2 cooing ponies to Elias's left and right. Bookbinder held up her hooves in mock defense.
"Now, Flashy, think about this. We can snuggle him together. Isn't that better for every
She didn't get to finish as Nightflash let loose all of his energy. Too much, in fact, which was precisely what Elias was counting on. The force of his loving tackle drove Bookbinder off at Elias's chest, and the human grinned in satisfaction as he seized his scratching distractions and got to his feet. He immediately heard protests from Bookbinder's parents, but Elias ignored them as he brushed himself off, looking with a smile at the flailing Bookbinder, who was being aggressively snuggled by a very happy Nightflash. The Pegasus rubbed himself on every part of her body before settling on top of her, laying his muzzle in her mane. The unicorn managed to throw a glare at Elias, who crossed his arms and grinned. "Not so nice on the receiving end, is it?" Bookbinder scoffed at him and wrapped her hooves around Nightflash, hugging him tightly.
"It is absolutely wonderful, Elias. And don't pretend for a second that you don't like snuggles. They made you smile, didn't they?"
Elias sighed, but nodded in agreement. Her noticing his smile seemed to drive it away, though Elias did his best to force a grin. Nobody else noticed save for Bookbinder, who gently tapped Nightflash. The Pegasus gave her one more last squeeze before climbing off, helping her to her feet. Standing side by side, she smiled brightly, then looked around the kitchen.
"This is every pony, so let's do introductions."
Bookbinder pointed first to her parents.
"Those 2 funny ponies are my parents, Velvet Breeze and Ice Shard. Well, apparently you've already met.
Elias nodded and looked at the bright blue unicorn. We did, but not under the best circumstances, though. Elias scratched his nose. I don't mean to seem rude, but I kind of figured you might have been somewhat angry with me leaving you in a room full of changelings. Eyeshard scarfed and waved his hoof. Nonsense. I saw how you were fighting. You were quite literally thrown out of the window. Heck, if you hadn't been, I would imagine you would have stayed up there while Princess Luna and the rest of her little group got away. The unicorn looked to his wife. Velvet, you should have seen it. Nightflash and I were fighting a hallway packed full of changelings, and this fine young guard comes barreling in, telling us to save the princess while he fought them all by himself. There must have been over 50 of the nasty little creatures. Bookbinder gritted her teeth in a forced smile and glared at Elias.
Really?
She asked, her tone clearly angry.
I had no idea that ever happened.
Elias chuckled. He was already going to be in a hole with the mare, but was digging a little deeper. It was much worse when we got Princess Luna's escape route. I locked her and Nightflash inside and faced off a changeling captain and his little attack force with a broken leg and more than a few stab wounds. That's how I got this lovely thing, he said, tapping his scar. Elias watched Bookbinder twitch in furious energy, but Shooting Star leaped in front of her, flapping in front of Elias's eyes as he gushed.
That's so cool, he crowed. Did you win? What did the changeling captain look like? Was he just like the rest of them? Can you read minds? Does your eye hurt?
The Pegasus yelped as he was yanked backward cruelly by his tail. His mother wrapped his hooves around him and immediately began brushing his mane, causing the young stallion to squirm.
Mom, you're embarrassing me, Shooting Star complained. Hush, his mother replied. I already warned you once today about flapping in the house, and I don't think you want me to notice that you and Nightflash were wrestling again, now do you?
Shooting Star's mouth clamped closed and he crossed his hooves irritably as he let his mother brush his hair. The unicorn looked at Elias cautiously.
I'm Moonlit Knight. You've already met Shooting Star, of course.
She looked to her right.
This is my husband, Night Twister, and our daughter, Sunny Fields.
Night Twister's eyes seemed to bore into Elias's skull as the gray Pegasus stared at the human. The little white unicorn in his lap was staring at Elias with curiosity now, rather than fear. Elias tried to avoid staring back at the pony, and instead met Moonlit Knight's eyes, extending his right hand slowly. I'm Elias, he said. The unicorn looked at his hand with obvious disgust, but she accepted it, giving a few quick shakes before letting the limb fall away. She looked at Nightflash with the frown clear on her across her face.
I thought you said your friend's name was Red, not Elias.
Nightflash smiled, but as his eyes flicked from Elias to his mother, Elias could tell that smile was strained. Mom, I already told you all about this, he said slowly. I call him Red, but every pony else calls him Elias. Legally, that is his name, and Red is my nickname for him. Elias opened his mouth to surprise Nightflash with some news that would make the pony happy, but Moonlight cut him off by scoffing and turning her nose.
Well, I think that's a silly name. What does it even mean? It's not a sensible name like Bookbinder or Shooting Star. Now those names have meaning.
Elias scratched his nose with a thumb and looked to the floor. Elias actually comes from the Greek translation of Elijah, or prophet, in the Bible. That's just the literal translation though, and most of the time Elias is used as a name for someone who is very kind and outgoing. Somebody who cares about everyone and everything, can always be trusted to be honest and loyal. Elias smiled widely and chuckled. It's really ironic, all things considered. But hey, nobody knew what the world was going to be like when they named me, so... Elias closed his eyes and took a moment to breathe. The flash of panic that rose in his mind was his own fault this time, but they didn't really make it any easier to drive the horrible images away. These were less gory than usual, but no less painful. The fact that it was such a simple beating made it all the harder to dispose of, and Elias couldn't help but to flinch when he felt a hoof on his arm.
Are you alright, Elias?
Bookbinder asked softly. I'm fine, Bookbinder, Elias replied. I just needed a second. I don't know why I said anything. He took another breath and opened his eyes. Bookbinder smiled, but unlike usual, she didn't make a motherly move. She instead gave him a quick hug before turning around to motion at the dining room.
If every pony will take a seat, Mom and I will have the food out in a minute.
She somehow got behind Elias and nudged him forward, where Nightflash slipped under his arm, forcing the human to scratch his ears while he picked up his Wonderbolts talk from earlier, shouting away loudly and brightly as he walked Elias to the table. Behind his back, Bookbinder not so subtly motioned for Ice-Heart to join the two. So anyway, I thought that this year Fleetfoot was going to be a good shot to open the first race, but it was Captain Spitfire again. I mean, I'm a big as fan as hers as the next Pegasus, but come on. You've got to let a newer pony take the lead sometime.
Night flashed little eyes to a chair at the end of the table, sitting him down quickly as he darted from the room in a flurry of feathers. Eyeshard blinked as the Pegasus leaped around him. Then he looked to Elias with a smile. He'll be back in a second, I'm sure. Eyeshard took a seat next to Elias. The human tapped the table with his fingers, biting his lip as he stared at the unicorn. He needed to ask, the question drilling a hole in his mind. Are you sure you aren't angry with me for leaving you? Accidental it might have been. Eyeshard smiled and shook his head. Of course not. I'm not angry with you. Who would be? You fought like a demon. And besides, I spent maybe an hour inside one of those little nasty pods. They didn't have time to drag me off to wherever they were storing ponies. The way I see it, you made my day a whole lot easier. I'm grateful if nothing else. It unnerved the human with how much the pony was smiling, but he couldn't see any malice or dishonesty in the gesture, so he just accepted it at face value. That thought made Elias blink, and he quickly did a search of his mind. Why did he accept it at face value? Had he not gotten himself into a deep hole by taking things at face value? He took the princesses both at face value, had believed in steady stream of lies they had fed him. Why would he trust these ponies? Just because they were family close to his friends? That didn't mean they didn't have ulterior motives. Already he could see the pieces falling into place. They were trying to make him softer, to make him feel like his service was a good thing. That's what Eyeshard was trying to do at least. They were trying to make him feel wanted, valued as a brutal warrior, a killer for the right team. What was wrong with that? The voice in the back of his head asked. Elias couldn't find a part of his mind that could answer the question in a way that mattered. His skill set wasn't that of a warrior. He was a killer, a fighter who knew what it took to destroy one's enemies. So why was he resisting what the ponies were trying to tell him? They weren't trying to neuter the warrior, only steer him in the right direction. His devastation of the changelings demonstrated Elias was no softer on his enemies than before, even if he did spare one of them. That was an old tactic as well, to give the enemy fear by letting one tell horrifying stories. Had they changed him? Did it matter if they did? Hadn't he be happier before today? Elias frowned as he tried to remember if he knew what happiness felt like. Quick flashes popped up. Elias was more than a little surprised at how many memories there were of the ponies who had wronged him. Even the times that he should have been miserable, Elias could only remember the events fondly. Getting locked in a cell with Luna, his many trips to the infirmary, especially with the one where he attempted to escape it to avoid that foul medication. Heart-forming Moni rose quickly to his mind, and Elias couldn't help but to feel happy as he remembered waking up next to Luna. She had woven that day carefully, and though it started out horribly, she had helped mend his relationship with Bookbinder, and that certainly wasn't a malicious action. Elias squashed all the happy thoughts brutally, recognizing the voice in the back of his head as he smacked it around, driving it back into its cage. He would not forgive and forget. The ponies had lied to him. Luna had lied to him. She didn't deserve his help, and she certainly didn't deserve his forgiveness. He tried to raise a wall of bitterness and hatred to block off the happy memories, but it functioned more like a net, letting many of the smaller moments slip through. A dark joke from Luna while in the throne room shift, a small hug from Nightshade thought nobody was looking. The effort just dug a hole in his anger and confusion deeper, and only when he felt the hoof on his arm did Elias manage to pull himself back to reality. Red? Are you okay? Nightflash said quietly. Elias blinked and met the Pegasus' eyes. It was still just the three of them in the dining room, and Elias could hear the occasional chatter coming from the kitchen, but that meant he hadn't zoned out for long. Eyeshard was giving him a curious look while taking notes on a pad of lined paper, while Nightflash just adjusted his head so they were staring into each other's eyes. Concern oozed from the pony, but Elias couldn't help but notice the massive book that was sitting on the table next to him. Elias tilted his head and motioned to it. What's that? Nightflash frowned at the obvious attempt at diverting the conversation. It's a binder from my Wonderbolts card collection. Are you sure you're alright, Red? You seem really off. Elias dodged the question by pointedly staring at the thick binder of cards. When Nightflash didn't move to grab it, Elias motioned towards the book. Are you gonna show me your cards or what? How am I supposed to find my interest in the Wonderbolts if nobody shows me anything about them? Nightflash looked torn. Elias could tell that the pony wanted to press on and help him with his internal issues, but he could also tell that Nightflash really wanted to further his education on the Wonderbolts. Over the winter they had been usually too tired to mention the flying team, then followed by the wedding and the subsequent changeling hunt. This was the first day that they had time to sit down and talk, and Elias knew which option would win out. Nightflash didn't disappoint as he snatched up the binder, leaning up to Elias's lap, leaning back against the human as he cracked it open, revealing a very detailed list of the different sections of the collection was separated into. We're going to snuggle and talk later, Red, you tricky human, but you have so much to cover. He stared at the table of continents for a moment, tapping his chin,
and then he gasped softly and began rapidly flipping through the pages, each packed full of cards. And this is just the first book? Elias thought with horror. Nightflash didn't seem to notice at all as he stomped on a page filled with glowing and shifting cards. He giggled softly in excitement, then looked at Elias. Tell me, Red, what do you know about collector's editions? There we go. Another fantastic chapter with more wholesome moments, and I can never ask for more, mainly because this fic is amazing. I love you, 80. Hi. What other fic is great is my friend Squall Windfeather's Somnambulance. You guys should check it out. I'm shilling incredibly hard because not only do I love him, but the fic is also really interesting and I enjoy it. It's something I'm going to make a project out of with full VAs, maybe some art. I haven't considered that part yet, but definitely full VA work. But my plans for the future aside, I would like to thank the ones who are currently supporting me, my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my Tier 1 Patreons, Squall Windfeather, Rainflicker, Starlight Blaze, Stewhex, and Dreamless Portal. My Tier 2 Patreons, Chase the Master, Sword Brother and Mordred, Nocturne, Solus, Artie Bryant, Captain Blue Shadow, HKH4 aka Texture, and the Animated Ghost. And a big thank you to my new Patreon, Danish Dash. I appreciate your support, man, it means a ton to me. And also, of course, a large thank you to Silent Titan. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.